All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Atlantic Institute's conversation on Oppenheimer. Um, I'm going to turn this conversation over to Catherine Fleming Bruce. She is our host for tonight. I am here providing the IT support. So go ahead,
Wonderful.
Catherine.
Thank you. Hey, thank you so much, Christina. And, once again, I want to start with thanking the Atlantic Institute for providing this opportunity. There are several of us independent um, producers who work with the Atlantic Institute to have these conversations. And I'm so proud to be one of them and to bring you this conversation today. So, I live in South Carolina. I am one of the things that I really have a great interest in is historic preservation. So I had the opportunity to watch the Oppenheimer film, and I'm aware of some of the properties. And I said, this is something that I would like to talk about is um, how historic sites help us with the understanding of the Oppenheimer legacy and history, and also how the film may link up to some of the individual questions that we might have, how people might end up going to these historical sites to learn more. But certainly, the Oppenheimer film has done so much to open people's minds about who J. Robert Oppenheimer was and his work with the atomic bomb. But they might have more questions that historical sites can answer. And I also want to note that today is the anniversary of Mr. Oppenheimer's passing. He passed away in 1967. And so I think talking about it from a historical site perspective is especially interesting. So I want to start with an interview that I did with the National Park Service. So we have Tom Smith with us, who is one of the staff there at the Manhattan Project. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we're going to share that conversation with you all.
I'm doing really well. Thanks for having me.
Great. Thank you so very much. And we wanted to start a little bit with, there are some people who don't know anything about, if I said Manhattan Project, they wouldn't have any idea at all. So let's just do a little brief on that, and then we can continue with our conversation.
Sure. Yeah. So the Manhattan Project took place in the early and mid 1940s, and it was the top secret project to develop an atomic bomb.
Okay.
And so, our role here in the National Park Service, the Manhattan Project National Historical Park was established by Congress in 2015. So by national park standards, we're a really young park. We're located, we're a bit unique in we are located in 3 different states. So we are here where I am talking to you today from Los Alamos, New Mexico. We also have Oak Ridge, Tennessee, and Hanford, Washington are other sites of our national park, of your national park. And the Oak Ridge and Hanford sites were responsible for the development of plutonium and uranium, which was ultimately shipped here to Los Alamos, where the secret atomic weapon was being finally designed.
Okay, now 2015, that's interesting to me because one of the things that I do is preserving historic sites, and that's so recent. So
it is.
So why the gap? Why this 50-year gap?
That's an interesting question. I can tell you that in all 3 of these communities and at least 30 other cities, there had been a movement for a long time of folks from many different communities that have a historical tie to the Manhattan Project, that contributed in one form or another to the Manhattan Project. and there's been interest from folks for a long time. I think one of the reasons it was probably difficult is uh, some of these sites are still active, secret, secure facilities that are still developing weapons, nuclear material, and so it is difficult to imagine an opportunity for visitors to visit a park that is also highly secure for national security and safety reasons. And so, the Park Service took a good hard look at, can we make this happen? If so, how could we do so effectively that we're able to preserve this very important story and also give visitors an opportunity to access and experience the Manhattan Project story. So in 2015, we were established as we are co-managed in partnership with the Department of Energy. So the National Park Service and the Department of Energy co-manage all three sites of the Manhattan Project. And we do a really great job, I hope, of collaborating with those folks to create as much opportunity as we can for the public to access their park, whether it's virtually or in person.
Now, what I'm thinking about the things that people might see when they come to the sites. And I'm also thinking about the people who have seen the Oppenheimer film. So what would people see in these three sites that might have some actual physical connection? Some call it ephemera, some call it artifacts. What are some of these types of things that people might see in a museum?
Yeah, so for the person that would visit us in person, at all three sites, there are museums, there are interpreters, there are special programs, hopefully a lot of times community programs, where people can come out and learn a lot of different perspectives of the Manhattan Project story. There's opportunities to see any number of historic structures of the Manhattan Project story and era. Here in Los Alamos, I'm in the middle right now, I'm in Fuller Lodge at Los Alamos within the National Historic Landmark District of the downtown area, which has a number of Manhattan Project era structures still to this day. That's for the in-person visitor. We've worked really hard on that virtual experience. We have some really exciting things going on in the virtual realm as well. We have an app, so everyone would be encouraged to just find the National Park Service app, and you could be sitting at home and have a virtual tour, or you could be here and have a sort of self-guided walking tour that's GIS enabled, and will tell you a lot about where you are, what you're looking at. We're really excited. Just this week, we put up some virtual exhibits on our website, nps.gov/MAPR. Those are things that we're really excited about because anyone can access them anytime. And it often gives us an opportunity to give people more access than they would just in person. So we have a lot there. We also, our social media presence, we work really hard to provide interesting, engaging, timely information to folks. And we also hope to engage people to have a dialogue. That's one great opportunity that social media presents is, we're not just interested in telling people about Manhattan Project, maybe the benefits and the costs, but we're also very interested in hearing from the public and sharing, how is this relevant to them? Many people come and they have stories from their families that they share. My grandfather worked in Oak Ridge, or I come from a tribe that's been affected by uranium and things. All these different perspectives get brought to us every day, and we're looking for opportunities to share that with the public because those are great interpretive materials as well. Here are the many experiences people have had in relationship to your story of the Manhattan Project.
That's a really way to personify what happens there. That makes sense. Yeah. I like that. So also, I'm thinking about the film, and of course today is the anniversary of Oppenheimer's passing. So how would you say that these sites are a part of Oppenheimer's legacy? What do they do to preserve and extend the legacy of Oppenheimer, the legacy of the atomic bomb story, and the nuclear science story? How do the sites do that?
I come from a background in education, and we talk a lot about experiential learning, place-based education, and that is true of learners of all ages. If you have an opportunity, it is one thing to read it, it is one thing to hear about it. It is entirely another to experience it. To have all five senses engaged in a moment, in a place. That is impactful in a way that's really hard to do any other way. And so when folks do have an opportunity to come to, say, Hanford or Oak Ridge or Los Alamos, I think first and foremost, I think what's important about it is it makes it more real, for lack of a better term, but it gives it a third dimension. This really happened. This is not just something that was printed in a book. And I think sometimes, our memories and history, without having sometimes that real, almost tangible connection to a moment, to a person, to a place, you can forget that it was real and that these are human beings full of flaws who were able to accomplish, in some cases, accomplish incredible things. And so I think that's really helpful for a lot of people, that it becomes not just something that happened, over time that they read about, but they are now a part of a place. They are now sort of connected to these people and these stories in a way that probably no other experience could bring.
And that's true of the film as well. People can watch the film and not have that tangible connection. The film is just a cinematic experience that you have that's not the same. So you can build on the knowledge that you have by actually going physically to one of these sites and standing where these people stood.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's much of a stretch for me to say that in terms of any film production that's ever been done, none have come closer to the audience feeling like they are in it or a part of it than what Christopher Nolan and his team put together. I mean, it's as engaging as that, I guess, virtual visitor will ever find. And we're really excited. It's created an enormous opportunity for us here. And we have a lot of partners, by the way. I mentioned, we co-manage with the Department of Energy. We have a Friends of Manhattan Project, Los Alamos here. We have a number of amazing volunteers at all three sites who help us to engage the public, many of whom have a lifetime of experience that they're able to bring to that story and share, their personal background or their professional background and their deep expertise in complicated, not just the story itself being extremely complicated, but the science, which of course is extremely complicated as well. So we're fortunate to have, and then we have a lot of community partners here in Los Alamos. The Los Alamos County does a lot. There's a number of incredible organizations. We have the Los Alamos Historical Society and the Los Alamos Historical Museum, who they own and are preserving the Oppenheimer House, the Hans Bethe House, a number of structures, as well as the Bradbury Museum here in town that shares more of those stories of nuclear development and the nuclear age. We also have the Peak Learning Center here in town, which also has some environmental and outdoor education. So between our visitor center and all of these other great places, and I'm only mentioning a few just here in my town of Los Alamos, but these all bring a part of the story together. That missing any one of those pieces would be unfortunate. Collectively, we create an opportunity for a visitor to learn a lot of different perspectives, and hopefully go away that this is not the last time they think about this subject.
Wanted to ask about filming and locations. So are you aware of any locations that were used as filming locations for the movie?
Yes. And I was not here. I was not yet here in Los Alamos when they filmed it. But as you go around town in the coffee shops, you can hear stories. Just about everybody who was here has at least one great story to share about the production of the Oppenheimer film. The building I'm standing in, Fuller Lodge, was a critical part of the Manhattan Project story. And in some ways, it was the heart of the community that is developed for the Manhattan Project here in Los Alamos. And it is featured quite a bit in the film. So you can see the Fuller Lodge structure. It's the actual structure. And I know that they had a number of, how films, the interior and the exterior can be different. There's some tricks they play on us there that work really well on screen. I know they filmed in Abiquiu, New Mexico. I can't recall any others offhand, but any number of places in New Mexico and elsewhere were all filming locations.
Right.
But if a person came here to Los Alamos, if you saw the film and then came here, you would immediately recognize this historic Fuller Lodge as part of that story.
So it was an exterior and interior shooting, or just exterior? Or do you know?
I know that definitely exterior, and I believe some interior. But I was told again, you hear stories. I just heard some great stories about this week. A lot of that interior was filmed in Abiquiu, New Mexico, so not far from here. And it's one of those sort of relics where some of that set, I'm told, has been left behind, and so people could go and visit the set if they wanted to. I'd rather them come see the actual Manhattan Project structures. It was filmed here in Fuller Lodge. I believe some was filmed in Robert in his actual home, in Oppenheimer's actual home here on site. I believe there's another building that's a related resource to the park, the Women's Dorm. I believe they did some filming in there as well. So I'm sure there's more. Those are a few right here within or near the National Historic Landmark District, where a lot of filming took place.
Now, what's interesting is that I was going to ask you what questions you have had to field from people who have seen the movie, but I also hear you saying we hear a lot of other things from people who have had experience, various experiences, like, they may have been nearby when the film was shot or wherever, and they had this experience. So there are a lot of conversations that have been produced by the film, not just questions, but have people come to you with questions? Oh, I saw the film, and these are some questions that I have.
Yeah, a lot of times when they come into Los Alamos, for example, while there's a lot that has been very well preserved of the Manhattan Project, after the project is over, many years later, the town, the security fences are moved, the lab is essentially moved away, and this becomes a public town. Anyone can come and live here today, and you can, there's, in many of the sort of chains or restaurants and coffee shops you might be familiar with. So it's just a town like any other in that respect. And so some folks come in and, kind of trying to imagine, trying to understand where they are in relationship to the history, and trying to imagine what that might have been like. And that's where, using the NPS app, our virtual exhibits online, and some of the great museums and organizations around town, they get that experience, they get that answer of where they are, what happened here. I think people are really fascinated by J. Robert Oppenheimer. He's certainly a person who had many phases in his life, from a young man who was subject to bullying, coming from a very unique background, early in life, not really feeling comfortable talking to people, having trouble understanding interrelationships of all kinds, and then eventually becoming an acclaimed, before the Manhattan Project, already becoming very well established in his own industry, very famous person, who becomes cool, and I doubt he knows, and I mean, with amongst his peers at that time, he was thought of as very cool and kind of the leader of a group of very intelligent young physicists. And so, that sort of transformation in the many eras of his life, only a few are shown in the film, but each of those different sort of phases, many of which come after World War II ends and the bombs are dropped on Japan, he still has more phases of life and goes through different sort of perspectives. His values on the atomic age change over time. And so I think all those things make him really relatable, and people are really curious, because here you have a person who, universally, I think it's thought that there are very few people that have the range of skill sets that he did to accomplish what they did. You can't just be a brilliant physicist. You also have to be a brilliant administrator. You also have to be a very effective communicator, very strong interpersonal skills, team building. There's so many facets of the logistics. All of these things, many of which he had little experience in before the Manhattan Project. He emerges as a very astute leader, just as brilliant as he is in physics. And so I think people are just very curious when you hear this was also a human who made mistakes, who had his own foibles and flaws. And those are some of the things that I like to discuss with the public because I want to make sure people remember that he was human in all figures, good and bad in history. I want folks to remember that they are probably somewhere on a continuum, just like every other person who's watching this right now. And I think that matters. I think that also is, it can be sort of a cautionary tale for some stories, but it can also be an inspiration where, here's in some ways, a very gifted person, but also in some ways a very sort of typical human that was capable of great things. And, it would be great if people walked away challenging themselves to where they can dig in and do great things.
Wow, that's really a very strong way to express one of the points of historic preservation. One of the main reasons why those of us in this work do this work. And again, when you look at the time frame between the time when Mr. Oppenheimer lived, passed away, I think in 1967, and the time between that and the work that he did, and the time between his passing and the creation of the Manhattan Project National Park sites. And actually, I think that creating national parks is a fairly new concept of a cluster of sites together. Selma is an example. Selma Montgomery is an example of this cluster of sites put together to create a full story. So the time between his passing and 2015 when y'all did this, and the time between 2015 and when this book was written and when the movie was done, all of these attempts to help us understand an individual and a scientific breakthrough and the various impacts. So yeah, I think you're right on point to say these are some things that we want people to come away with who have seen the movie. This is what we want them to focus on. I think especially today on the anniversary of his passing, that's something that we should focus on.
Yeah, I think so too. And I would be remiss if I didn't add, again, one of the things we really aspire that visitors in person or visitors online, using the app, using social media, one of the things that we hope that people take away from this story is that it is neither in we are creating neither heroes nor villains here. And that is not our job in the National Park Service. We do call ourselves America's storytellers, and we take great pride in that. We do believe that we are a place to facilitate conversation amongst Americans, amongst people around the world. And one of the ways, it's incumbent upon us if we're going to do that we include not just this incredible story of human achievement, but also the story of tragedy. Of course, what happened in Japan is a tragedy. It would be, to call it anything else would be very difficult. So, you have other impacts. You have, there are families who had World War II veterans whose lives may very well have been saved by the dropping of the bombs on Japan. You have downwinders, who are people who live in communities who, after nuclear bomb testing, that nuclear material blew down into their communities and may very well have had some very real impacts on the environment and the human body. You have the tribes, the very first land managers of this area, who have been affected in various ways, including uranium mining. And so there are a lot of, everything with the atomic story, whether it is the development of an atomic weapon or the further development of atomic energy, there are pros and cons. I have no interest in a visitor walking away getting a perspective, an opinion from me on it, but rather it's my job to share this larger collection of costs and benefits of this story. And I hope that they walk away very curious and wanting to ask more questions. That's all I hope for. If we have people doing that, we've done our job.
Well, I really appreciate having the opportunity to speak at length with Tom with the Manhattan Project about the things that people can learn when they get there. I wanted to show you a few additional sites, and certainly I did show you the website, but I want to do that again. That's the National Park Service Manhattan Project site, where you can connect with all three of these locations: New Mexico, Washington, and Tennessee, and hear a variety of pieces of information. So I wanted to make sure you have that. I also briefly showed you the Hiroshima Peace Museum. And so they have also dedicated themselves in Hiroshima, Japan, to this memorial museum to make sure people understand the impact on Japan, and also a commitment to make sure that there's not another nuclear bombing. So in order to do this, they produced a museum for children. You can see here on the map a memorial park, a memorial hall for the atomic bomb victims, and a number of other interpretive measures that they have done. So that is another of the sites. And of course, that isn't something that's talked about in the Oppenheimer film, but that is a part of the historic sites, places that are a part of this. Also wanted to show, this is a building here in Columbia, South Carolina. This is the home of one of the African-American scientists who worked with the Manhattan Project. So this is the home of Edwin Russell here, and it's located in downtown Columbia. It's not a museum per se, but it has been recognized as part of the effort to tell the full story of all of the people who had some connection with the work at the Manhattan Project. So having talked about that, this would be a good time to entertain some questions. I'll go ahead and turn off the share, and we can, if there are any questions or particular points that people want to make about what we have heard and what we think historic sites might accomplish, what they might do better, with regard to what message we want to give people about what happened at these historic sites in developing the atomic bomb, and what they think they would like to see.
I was going to read you, Sylvia posted in here while we were listening to his conversation that they visited Los Alamos in August 2023, shortly after watching the movie. She said they learned so much more walking through the historical areas and touring the local museums. So educational. Thank you to the U.S. Park Service and community partners. So thank you for finding the Park Service, because I can tell you I've done some tours of faith of different churches and things along like the northeastern area of coast of the US. And it is so interesting how much knowledge the parks services people have,
Yes.
you know, on these things, the depth of knowledge of history that they have.
Yes.
They, I don't think we give them enough credit.
Absolutely. And of course, it's also important to note that the National Park Service sites are approved by Congress. So every year there's an allocation to support those sites. So it's really important for us to tell our members of Congress, hey, we're really happy to have the National Park Service. They're doing carrying out an important mission, and we support what they're doing.
Yeah. And I think the guys are the Park Service guys, they tend to be really excited to actually talk to somebody and actually have a virtual interview too sometimes. They really do kind of enjoy that, they're important, but that we actually value their input. So it's kind of
Yes.
cool.
Yes, and I must say also that I did reach out to the Oppenheimer House, the Los Alamos History Museum. Um, there's a nuclear atomic museum. There's a couple of other, so I kind of put a blanket call to be in an interview with all of them, and you can imagine that since the opening of the Oppenheimer film, and now we're in award season and they're getting all these awards, that they don't have a lot of time to talk to us. So I was so grateful to get the call back from Mr. Smith saying, hey, I can do the interview, because I had one person said I could do it. They dropped off because they're just getting slammed.
I can imagine.
Yes, yes. And I wanted to ask Fiona if she had been watching BAFTA, by the way. I think that BAFTA is the British, I don't know, British awards in film and television, something like that. And I think they had their ceremony today. So I don't know if you watch that, if you know what happened or not.
No, I didn't, but I did hear on the news just before, because it's 10 in the evening here.
Right. Wow.
Well, no, it's later than 10 in the evening.
Oh my goodness.
But I did hear that Oppenheimer got quite a few awards, but I don't know what.
Wow. Okay. Well, we
So
expected that.
watch the news. Watch the news.
Yes, yes, we will. We will. And certainly, we also want to recognize the United Kingdom, because Christopher Nolan and his wife are from the United Kingdom. Many of the actors are from the United Kingdom as well that are in the film. So you all had a great contribution to people's understanding of this legacy, and that could be combined with the historical sites and the other pieces of the story. But now there'll be pieces that people will want to know more about Christopher Nolan, more about the other actors that were in the film, and maybe take a look at that. And of course, Oppenheimer spent some time in Europe, so they'll want to know more about those locations and visit those as well. And we want to thank you for being there, and it's so late there. We want to thank you for staying up to be with us.
My pleasure.
Okay.
So I just will give you a perspective for somebody I'm 43. It actually was kind of neat. So I grew up seeing Albert Einstein in all of our books,
Mhm.
history books, and
Mhm.
that was it. Like the little pictures of Albert Einstein in the bush in the book, in the history books. So it was kind of so I don't know. I think when you see somebody in a history book, you think that they're like really old
Yeah.
and like ancient times. That's kind of what you think in your head. So to see these pictures of Albert Einstein, like in I'm gonna say like in real life is what people say now. It's kind of like, oh, he was around like in that in that era. And I'm like, oh, he does look like that. And like I kind of thought it was just kind of interesting to see science at work.
Yes.
It's this kind of like an interesting thing, because I don't know, as a kid, when you see stuff in the history book, you just think that stuff is like from a really long time ago and they're a really old person. And,
That's a good point. That's a good point. And as as important as it is to make sure people understand these histories, it's incumbent upon these organizations to really do a good job of making sure that people can actually connect with that past and bring it to something relevant today. I did want to try to I'm going to try to go back to my screen share. I want to see if I can find the Atomic Museum. I'm going to see if I can find that. Okay, I think this might be it. Okay, yeah, I just wanted to provide another place for, so there's several other places for people to go in the US to learn more about Oppenheimer, about, so there's not just the National Park Service, there are these other locations that have been created to try to tell that story. And another part of the story that I actually had the chance to go to is a nuclear test site in Las Vegas. So I'm going to try to find that in Las Vegas real quickly.
I find
Yes.
it very interesting, the focus that there was back then, on all of this, because this was a very, very big talked about thing. This was the focus of all of this back then. Um, there was a lot more focus, I think, on the, because I guess there was the war and everything going on. There's a lot more focus on nationality and military and government. There's a lot more focus in that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And this is the site that I actually had a chance to visit a couple of years ago with the National Public History Association. There's an international version of that. But they have their annual conference, and then they had tours that you could go on. And so this is one of the tours, and you had to have the what they call the smart ID. I think that's what they call it. And I actually went ahead and made sure I had that.
Oh.
So I had to have that in order to get onto this site. So I want to invite everybody to check out this site as well, and it's the Atomic Heritage Foundation. And they also have something called Voices of the Manhattan Project. So I want people to be sure to take note of that. This is different oral histories that the Atomic Heritage Foundation has collected. So they have some that are recent. And there's the Oppenheimer interview. But they have a whole collection, 600 of these interviews. And they also have voices from Japan. They interviewed the men who flew on the atomic bombing missions. So this is a fantastic resource that I wanted to be able to share with you at all. So this is the Atlantic Nuclear Museum, Voices of the Manhattan Project.
Very interesting.
Okay. I'm gonna
Can I just say something? I
yes, please.
I am kind of off topic on this, but about 10 years ago, I was in Tinian. Does anybody know anything about Tinian? Does anybody know about it? Tinian is the island in the Northern Marianas that took the bombs off that bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And we were in the bomb pits where those planes took off.
Oh, wow.
What an experience. And what happened was that after they did, they just left everything. They just left everything as it was. And when we were there, they were still, it looked like the war was still on. They still had old landing craft and all that kind of thing. It was an incredible experience.
I visited the Aviation Museum in Virginia Beach 2 years ago when I was over there for a family reunion. And a lot of those planes that they have in those hangars, they still fly. They take them to the aviation shows and they still fly. And you can get up and you can see them and you can like climb, some of them you can. It was so, we were really tiny back then. I was like, how do people fit in this? And sometimes you just kind of sit there for a second and kind of imagine back then what this was like. Imagine like this is your job. You're in your military uniforms. You've had your trainings. Like this is, what all of these buttons are. What all of this stuff is. And it was like, it's kind of surreal just to think somebody was actually in this aircraft. Somebody actually, flew this. And it's kind of a very interesting thing. So I can imagine being in the space where they had everything and took off and all of that. I mean, that sometimes history just really hits you.
It sure did. And we didn't see the airplanes because there's nothing there because it was all bombed.
Right.
But the islands, they are 1,500, I think 1,500 miles due south of Tokyo. That's where these islands are in the Pacific. And just incredible. Made the whole Second World War come right to our, when you get up and have breakfast, you can see it when lunchtime. It's amazing. And I'm surprised that nobody knew the name Tinian because that's the name of the island. It was Saipan, Tinian, and Rota were the three Northern Marianas Islands.
Well, I'm going to
Wow.
see if I can bring that up real quick too, because I would like people to have the opportunity to look at that a little later online. Do you have the spelling for that?
I'm sorry?
The spelling for the Tinian?
Tinian is Tinnnian, I think, but Saipan is the other one, Saipan. It's the original one, and there you are.
Northern Mariana Islands?
That's it, yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So I just want people to kind of see what you were talking about there and be connected to whatever the sites were. And here's some other sites here connected with that.
Yes, that's where
Okay, and here's the Nuclear Museum.
they have one there, Tinian Island, yeah.
Okay, so that's also a part of the Heritage Foundation, the Atomic Heritage Foundation.
That's a long way to go, though, to get to see that island.
It said according to Catherine's thing, at 1 hour and 1 day and 18 hours. 1 day and 18 hours or something when you pulled that up.
Wow.
It's a distance to travel.
Wow.
I don't think it was 18 minutes. I think it was 1 day, 18 hours. I just noticed that out of the corner of my eye. I was like, whoo, that takes a while.
Yeah. And that's why it's good to, we're grateful that people have put up these websites so that people connect on their own time from their own location and eventually get to hopefully visit some of these sites. But you can support and visit so that these continue, because all of these sites require continued maintenance, continued promotion, and continued support so they can keep doing the work of bringing the conversations, bringing the oral histories, preserving those locations and helping people get a better understanding of what happened so that understanding can be translated into what we think about and do today.
Yes, they said that. I think when they brought the LRTs, which were the landing craft, came off of the boats when they wanted to get onto the island, the average lifespan for an American coming off there was about 10 minutes. They were all killed by the Japanese as they came off, and that's when that thing had to do something, and that's when they started. It was the whole ocean was red with blood, they said.
Oh my goodness.
So something else to just add to your things when you're talking about it, you can look at that.
Okay, we'll be sure to do that.
Yeah, I'm a Canadian, so and my husband was working there, so we spent 3 months there.
Well, I'm so glad you joined this conversation. We're able to share that with us. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
And that's all the time that I think we're going to have for this. So I appreciate so much all of you coming and being a part of this conversation. It has been recorded, so we'll be able to put it up and share it with other folks. And hopefully others will use the day of the anniversary of Oppenheimer's passing to learn more by visiting some of these sites. So thank you again, Christina.
Thank you very much, Catherine, for bringing this to us. So this was very interesting. And yes, I was going to say, Nancy, I hope your driver enjoyed the conversation while we were talking and you're getting where you're going safely. Yeah, let me stop recording.